Everyone tells you that the first $100,000 is a nightmare to save. They quote Charlie Munger. They tell you to cut your lattes, sacrifice your weekends, and live like a monk. And they are right. The first $100,000 requires pure, aggressive, defensive discipline. It is an exercise in raw willpower. But here is the massive, silent trap that destroys 90% of wealth builders. The habits that got you to your first 100,000 will absolutely prevent you from reaching your first million. If you keep acting like a defensive saver once you have capital, you enter a state of financial stagnation. You become trapped in a loop of diminishing returns, watching your hard-earned cash lose purchasing power to an evolving economy, while missing the critical transition to offensive wealth architecture. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the silent math of the second 100,000. We will explore exactly why you must break your old financial identity, how the wealthiest individuals shift from saving money to buying asymmetric assets, and the precise blueprint to turn your baseline capital into an automated compounding machine. This isn't about traditional budgeting anymore. This is about structural leverage. Let's look at the foundational math. When you start at zero, your savings rate is the only metric that matters. If you earn $70,000 a year and manage to save $10,000, your investment returns on that initial capital are statistically irrelevant. A 10% return on $1,000 is just $100. It doesn't change your life. Your personal labor and your frugality are doing 100% of the heavy lifting. This is where the scarcity mindset is born and reinforced. You learn to view every single dollar as something to be protected, hoarded, and kept safe. But look at what happens when your portfolio crosses that crucial six-figure threshold. At $100,000, a simple 7% market return generates $7,000 in a single year without you lifting a finger. Suddenly, the math undergoes a violent structural shift. Your capital begins to shadow your personal labor. If you continue to focus all your mental energy on cutting small expenses, you are optimizing for pennies while misallocating your most valuable asset, your cognitive bandwidth. The trap is real, and it is comfortable. To understand why this trap is so dangerous, let's look at the story of Alex, a corporate strategist. Alex did everything by the book to secure his first six figures. He worked 60-hour weeks, minimized his rent by living far from the city center, drove a reliable but heavily depreciated vehicle, and tracked every single cup of coffee on a complex spreadsheet. He felt a profound sense of pride when his brokerage account finally hit $100,000. He believed he had cracked the code to financial freedom. But 2 years later, Alex realized he was completely stuck. He was exhausted from years of deprivation. His income had plateaued because he had no time to network or upgrade his skills, and his portfolio was growing painfully slow. Why? Because he was treating his $100,000 like a trophy to be guarded, rather than an army to be deployed. He was terrified of taking any calculated risks, keeping 70% of his capital in low-yield savings accounts, because the thought of a market correction felt like a personal attack on his past sacrifices. He was trapped in the defensive illusion. This brings us to the core problem, the psychological anchor of your first financial milestone. When you sacrifice deeply for a specific dollar amount, that number becomes tied to your self-worth. You begin to fear losing it more than you desire growing it. This is known in behavioral economics as loss aversion, and it scales aggressively once you have something substantial to lose. The defensive habits that served as your armor during the initial accumulation phase turn into heavy, restrictive shackles. Think about the classic wealth advice. Maximize your retirement accounts. Invest only in broad market indexes, and never carry debt. While this is fantastic advice for someone trying to get their financial footing, it can become an optimization ceiling. True wealth acceleration requires a transition from defensive preservation to calculated offensive capital allocation. It requires understanding that cash is not a safe haven. It is an asset class designed to melt away under inflationary pressures.
If you leave your capital sitting idle, you are actively choosing a guaranteed loss over a calculated risk.
Let's break down the mathematical velocity of compounding to see the difference clearly. To go from $0 to $100,000, taking a standard savings approach of $10,000 a year at a 7% return, takes roughly 7 to 8 years. It feels like an eternity. Your manual contributions account for nearly 80% of that total accumulation. The compounding engine is barely turning over. It's cold, inefficient, and slow. Now look at the journey from $100,000 to $200,000. Assuming the exact same $10,000 annual contribution and the same 7% return, your time to reach the next milestone drops drastically to under 5 years. More importantly, look at the composition of the growth. Nearly half of that second $100,000 is generated entirely by your existing money working for you. Your money is now doing a significant portion of the heavy lifting. This is where the wealth curve starts to bend upward, moving away from linear effort and toward exponential expansion.
If the math is so clearly in your favor, why do so many people fail to make the leap? Because they refuse to change their relationship with leverage. When you are building your first 6 figures, leverage is dangerous. Consumer debt, high-interest car loans, and overextended mortgages are financial poison. You are taught to avoid leverage at all costs, and this rule keeps you alive in the early stages. But as you transition to your second 100,000, you must learn to distinguish between destructive consumer leverage and constructive structural leverage. Constructive leverage is using capital to buy back your time, acquiring assets that generate asymmetric returns, or utilizing strategic debt to acquire cash-flowing real estate. The wealthy do not build empires using only their own saved capital. They build empires by mastering the spread between the cost of capital and the return on capital. If you maintain an absolute dogmatic fear of leverage, you lock yourself into a lifetime of trading time for money.
Let's return to Alex's journey. The turning point came when Alex looked at his spreadsheets and realized his frugality had reached a point of diminishing returns. He could spend hours researching how to save $50 on his grocery bill, or he could use that same cognitive energy to restructure his investment portfolio and negotiate a 20% increase in his primary income. He had to learn to value his time at its true future worth, not its current nominal value. Alex made a conscious, terrifying decision to pivot. He stopped tracking pennies and started tracking macro trends. He took $30,000 of his capital out of cash and invested it into a targeted, tax-advantaged real estate syndication that offered a preferred return. He spent $5,000 on a premium executive coaching program to learn how to position himself for a senior leadership role. He shifted his focus entirely from how do I spend less to how do I command more value. This was the moment he stopped being a saver and became a wealth architect.
The results of this shift were immediate and compounding. By upgrading his skills and expanding his network through the coaching program, Alex secured a promotion within 9 months that raised his base salary by $45,000. Suddenly, his annual savings capacity doubled without him having to cut back on his lifestyle. Meanwhile, his real estate investment began distributing quarterly cash flow, which was immediately routed automatically into his equity portfolio. His money was no longer sitting static in a digital vault. It was actively circulating through an ecosystem of growth. The mental anxiety he used to feel every time the stock market dipped began to evaporate. He realized that a market correction wasn't a threat to his survival. It was a seasonal sale on high-quality assets. His psychological anchor had shifted from capital preservation to systemic accumulation. He was no longer working for his portfolio. His portfolio was aggressively working for him.
To replicate this transformation, you must implement what we call the 3 pillars of offensive capital allocation. The first pillar is the absolute automation of your baseline investments. Once you have $100,000, you should no longer be manually logging into accounts to buy shares or transfer funds. Your foundational wealth engine, Your low-cost index funds, your retirement matches, your automated treasury bills must run seamlessly in the background. This automation accomplishes two critical things. It removes emotional decision-making from your day-to-day life, and it frees up your mental bandwidth. You want your foundational investments to be completely boring, predictable, and mechanical. If you are still checking your stock portfolio 3 times a day once you have 6 figures, you are treating investing as a form of entertainment or anxiety management, rather than a scalable utility. Turn the machines on, step away, and let the baseline compound quietly.
The second pillar is the creation of an asymmetric opportunity fund. When you are broke, an emergency fund is a defensive shield designed to cover 3 to 6 months of expenses so you don't go into debt when your car breaks down. It is purely survival-oriented. But once you cross $100,000, a portion of your liquid capital must morph into an offensive weapon, an opportunity fund. This is capital specifically earmarked to take advantage of market dislocations, distressed asset sales, or sudden high-yield private investments. When the economy experiences a downturn, the defensive saver panics and hoards cash. The offensive wealth architect looks at their opportunity fund and prepares to buy cash-flowing assets at a profound discount. Having $50,000 ready to deploy during a market panic is worth more than 5 years of aggressive coupon clipping. You are no longer praying for stability. You are positioned to profit from volatility.
The third pillar is investing heavily in your own economic moat. The greatest leverage multiplier available to you will always be your primary earning capacity. If you can increase your income from $100,000 to $250,000 a year, your ability to fund your investment engine completely dwarfs any micro-optimization you could perform on your asset allocation. Use your capital to purchase specialized knowledge, secure proprietary data, build scalable systems, or hire mentors who can skip your learning curve by a decade. The defensive mindset views a $5,000 seminar or a specialized certification as an expense to be avoided. The offensive mindset views it as an asset purchase with an infinite return on investment. If you are not willing to bet capital on your own ability to execute and scale, why should you expect the market to do it for you? Build a moat around your skills that makes you irreplaceable in the modern economy.
Let's analyze the true cost of staying defensive. Imagine 2 investors, both holding $100,000. Investor A maintains the scarcity mindset. They keep their money in a mix of high-yield savings accounts and conservative bonds, earning a safe 4%. They continue to live under high stress, spending hours managing minor household costs, terrified of losing their nest egg. Over a 10-year period, adjusted for real inflation and taxes, their $100,000 has effectively flatlined in purchasing power. They worked incredibly hard to stay exactly where they started. Now look at Investor B, our wealth architect. They keep $20,000 in an opportunity fund, automate $60,000 into diversified global equities, and invest $20,000 into scaling their business and network. Over that same 10-year period, their equity portfolio doubles, their scaled skills triple their primary income, and their opportunity fund allows them to acquire a distressed property during a mid-cycle correction. Investor B didn't work harder than Investor A. They simply operated with a superior structural framework. This structural framework is what separates the upper middle class from the truly wealthy. The upper middle class optimizes for income and savings. They want a high salary and a big bank balance because it gives them a sense of security. But wealth is not measured by the size of your bank statement. It is measured by the structural resilience and velocity of your asset architecture. You must begin to view your finances like a corporation views its balance sheet. A healthy corporation doesn't sit on mountains of unproductive cash just to feel good. They deploy capital into research and development, strategic acquisitions, and infrastructure to ensure long-term dominance. Your personal life is no different. Your first $100,000 was your initial seed funding. Your second $100,000 is your first real capital deployment phase. Treat it with the strategic seriousness it deserves. Stop treating your money like a child that needs protection and start treating it like a specialized workforce that needs clear, aggressive directives.
As we look toward the future, the economic landscape is shifting faster than ever. Traditional career paths are disrupting, inflation patterns are increasingly unpredictable, and old financial rules of thumb are proving obsolete. In this environment, hyperfrugality is a losing strategy. You cannot save your way to true freedom when the underlying currency is structurally designed to lose value over time. The only real security is a diversified portfolio of productive, high-leverage assets and a skill set that commands premium pricing. By breaking out of the defensive trap now, you position yourself to ride the waves of economic volatility rather than being crushed by them. The transition requires courage. It requires looking at the habits that saved you in your 20s and early 30s and realizing they are the exact same habits that will limit you in your 40s and 50s. It's time to retire the scarcity playbook and step into the role of a true capital allocator.
Let's bring this blueprint to a concrete close. Look at your current financial setup today. Are you holding on to excess cash out of fear? Are you spending hours on tasks that yield pennies instead of focusing on major income multipliers? If you are ready to break away from the exhaustion of the defensive grind and start building an automated, high-leverage wealth system, hit the like button right now. It lets me know you understand the math and are ready to execute at a higher level. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming deep dive breakdowns on advanced asset architecture, structural tax strategies, and asymmetrical investing frameworks. The first $100,000 proved you have the discipline to survive. The second $100,000 will prove whether you have the vision to truly build an empire. The choice is yours. Stop saving for security, start investing for absolute freedom, and automate the journey. We will see you in the next analysis.